Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Lunch with the Experts series. And I am Cook County Commissioner Donna Miller. And we're going to just be getting started here in just a moment. We would like to take a minute to let everyone join into the broadcast and get comfortable so we can bring on our speakers and get into our conversation this morning or this afternoon. Hello, I see Jacqueline Underwood. Hello, how are you? So we're going to wait for people to join in on this beautifully sunny day today, which is fantastic. So just let us know if you're here. Just say hello in the chat so we can know how many people are on, and then we'll get started. We're going to wait about a minute or two to get started, but we certainly appreciate all of you for joining in today, and text a few people and let them know they can also join us. We're just waiting for the audience to build and get people into the broadcast. It takes a couple minutes. Thanks everybody for joining. We appreciate you being here. Doretha, I see you as well. Well, I just wanted to get started. So we're about 2 minutes in, so we'll get started with the presentation. So we wanted to get everyone together to talk about how we can navigate and actually have a healthy holiday season, but also a happy holiday season in light of everything that's going on in the new normal as we are changing our behaviors and learning new ways to interact, such as what we're doing right now. Instead of having a presentation in person, we are conducting a presentation via Facebook Live, because this is really a safe alternative for people to meet and share information. So I appreciate you being here. We wanted to focus on what we're going to do in these next coming weeks because of the staggering numbers of COVID-19 affecting every community, but very specifically and impactfully affecting the Black and Brown communities, as it did in the beginning, but it's even worse now. And I think that that is really the message that we need to get out to everyone. They talk about people having COVID fatigue. Yes, we are tired of, talking about it, dealing with it, but the numbers are increasingly worse. And so we need to have a heightened sense of what's going on. And it might not be easy for people to understand or comfortable for people to deal with. And that's where we also have the mental health effects of how COVID is impacting Black and Brown communities. So today we are so fortunate to have on our expert panel people who can help us address what's happening in our communities right now. And everyone, this is not just happening in Chicagoland area or Cook County or Illinois. This is across the entire United States. So the real message right now for everyone is to stay home. Unfortunately, we cannot gather for Thanksgiving with our family and friends and have outings. I'm just astonished when I saw the number of people on the news at the airports. They said that the airport flights are down only by 15% from where they were last year. That does not really, to me, indicate people who think we are still in a global pandemic. So we need to do everything we can to try to make sure we're having a healthy and happy Thanksgiving, but how can we do that in a way that makes us all feel whole connected, and safe. The big issue is being safe. So I would like to introduce Dr. Kiran Joshi, who is one of the co-directors for the Department of Public Health for Cook County. And I'd like for him, he's going to talk to us today about what this impact is having on the public health issues. He's going to do a slide presentation for us to explain some of the things you might have been hearing in the news and what it means to you very directly. And we also have a behavioral health professional here with us today, Heather Duke, who is a marriage and family therapist. And we all know sometimes the holidays bring out bad things amongst families anyway, but this might bring a heightened sense of what's going on in families and the disconnectivity that families will experience. And Heather will talk to us about that. But first, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Joshi. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Joshi, and sharing your expertise with all of us on this important topic.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Miller, for the opportunity to get what I think are some really key public health messages out there. I always start out these conversations by saying that COVID-19, while it's a pretty insidious disease and it really kind of takes advantage of our natural human tendencies to be social creatures, it's also been an exercise in altruism, right? We're all sort of relying on each other to protect one another, and particularly to protect the most vulnerable among us, including our seniors and folks with chronic conditions. So if we can come together and follow the good evidence-based public health guidance to mask, physically distance, wash our hands or use alcohol-based hand sanitizer, and get our flu shots, then I think we can really make a dent in fighting this thing. So with that, I had some slides prepared, and I wanted to talk everyone in Facebook land through what we look at, what the Department of Public Health looks at to make decisions and to stay informed about the current state of COVID-19. And so, Ryan, if you could start the slides. So if folks want to check out our website, they could do it by going to cookcountypublichealth.org. And you can go to our website and, next slide, please. And the first thing you'll see is this is our home screen. And you can click on that COVID-19 header right there. And I've highlighted with a red arrow where we keep our COVID-19 data. Thanks, Ryan. Next slide. All right. So if you were to click on that link, this is probably the first thing that you would see. By the way, that link up top, it's actually the direct link to that website. So if this is something, if you're a data geek like me and like Ryan, then you will bookmark this so you have really easy access to it. So these numbers are a few days old, but what you see here are really the grim reality of COVID-19. So we're north of 110,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in suburban Cook County alone, paired with an unfortunate and really grim number of 2,353 deaths. And I want to take a moment here to say, while I'm a data geek and a public health guy, I'm also a physician, and I'm well aware that each of these deaths represents a life. It represents holiday meals not had, Zoom calls not shared, drinks not shared, games not played together. And I think we really need to keep that in mind in terms of the richness of the lives that have been lost. And we should look to that as just more reason, once again, to come together and follow the good public health guidance that I mentioned earlier. So below those, you see a couple of boxes with our weekly case rate. And we use that number to see how we're doing against our total population and compare ourselves to other jurisdictions. On the right-hand side, you see what's called our test positivity. As you can see, that's 16.5%. So what that number really means is that weekly case rate or the number of confirmed cases going up because we're simply testing more? Or is it because there's increasing transmission in our communities? And so we use that to distinguish between increases in the case rates or case counts just due to increased testing or true increases in the spread of COVID-19. Next slide. Okay, so in addition to just those raw numbers, we do like to provide context, particularly context over time. And so you can see here the cases reported over time beginning in March, April, with that peak back in May. And the thing to really pay attention to here isn't so much the absolute numbers, rather it's the trend and the rate of rise or decline of the curve that you see. So I think what's most concerning about this is that in late October and early November, we had this really steep incline in the number of cases. And that is the reason that, as you may have heard, we started to impose more mitigation measures. Things like saying, maybe we want to reduce the number of people who could dine indoors, and then ultimately, a few weeks back, saying we really don't want to dine indoors anymore because we know that there's really good public health evidence that indicates that indoor dining can result in the spread of COVID-19. Next slide. Okay. So this goes back to that idea of test positivity that I was speaking to earlier. So you've got the total number of tests that are being performed, and then you've also got the positivity and how that's changing. And so you can see that's about 16%, up from around a rate that was floating between, I'd say, 4 and 5% over the last few months in the summer. So again, we've seen increases in the test positivity along with an increase in the number of cases, telling us that yes, indeed, this is real. Just some context, some additional context for the test positivity, and it's that the state sets a threshold of about 8% test positivity to start thinking about when we should issue additional mitigation measures. So back a few weeks ago when we issued that guidance, this is one of the numbers that we were looking at. Next slide, please. Okay, so in addition to, again, just the raw data, we do like to drill down, and we do that in a number of different ways. Here you see some bar graphs that break down the different rates of cases by race and ethnicity. And so it's pretty clear here that Latinx folks have been most affected by COVID-19 in terms of cases. And we see on the right-hand side that African-American folks have been most affected in terms of hospitalizations. So one way to interpret that is that it appears that Latinx folks are being exposed more potentially and are thereby acquiring COVID-19 more frequently. And you're seeing African-American folks there on the right being most affected with severe illness. So there are a number of factors that are driving this, but there's an increasing understanding in public health that the underlying causes here, the things that if you start to ask why are these differences there? If you keep digging, you uncover these structural factors and things like systemic racism that result in people of color having a higher risk of exposure and worse outcomes for COVID-19. So I want to be clear here, by way of some examples. So for Latinx folks, I suspect that they may be being exposed more because they're more likely to be essential workers, right? Workers who are often faced with that impossible choice of either staying home and avoiding exposure or going out to their jobs and earning a living and feeding their families. And for African American folks, there's a long history in Cook County of structural and systemic racism. By way of an example of that, we know of this policy called redlining back in mid-century, mid-20th century, where the federal government basically said, you can only buy homes in these areas. And that led to what we know of as a wealth gap over time and different rates of poverty and so forth. And we know that income, for one, is directly related to health outcomes. So I'm just trying to sort of make the links here between these historical factors, these historically racist policies, and current health outcomes. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we see a graph that I find kind of interesting and also, quite troubling. On the left-hand side, you see, again, the cases, but this time the cases in the bar graph are by age. And you see that it's really the 20-somethings that are acquiring COVID-19 the most. And we think that's because 20-somethings have this combination of not being as risk averse, right? Being willing to take some risks in terms of going out there, and also being a lot healthier. And so on the right, what you see is the hospitalizations broken down by age. And you see that 20-somethings are really way down there when it comes to hospitalizations, but older folks are hospitalized much more frequently. And you can see that there's this very sort of stepwise fashion to this graph. And so that tells me that there's really something about aging and getting older that puts you at higher risk of poor outcomes for COVID-19. Next slide, please. Okay, so I like this map in particular because if you click on the radio button, that shows you where the recent percent change map on the left-hand side up there. This basically gives you a heat map of where we're seeing the most cases, in which municipality we're seeing the most cases over the last 2 weeks. So this is a screenshot, and if you went to the actual map, what you would see if you moused over a particular area, you would see the name of the municipality. So you could easily see, if your own municipality were a hotspot or not. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my last slide, and I wanted to just speak to some holiday do's and don'ts. And you can see that there are more do's than there are don'ts. And the reason for that is that I am well aware that people do not like being told what not to do. And I certainly am one of those people. If somebody tells me something and it's a directive, it just automatically makes me want to do the opposite thing. So if you've got issues with authority, I'm with you. So just a couple of points that I wanted to make here are that there are things that we could do that are quite easy and that actually make your life more convenient if you do them, and also simultaneously lower your risk of COVID-19. So when it comes to gift buying, obviously online shopping is huge, and it's easy to do that and potentially arrange for curbside pickup. Now, I happen to know that, and I want to champion our smaller businesses who also have developed online mechanisms to make purchases and curbside delivery. So bottom line, do whatever you can do to avoid having to go into the store and potentially interact with other folks. Obviously, I want to encourage folks not to travel very clearly and to stay home and celebrate with your immediate household. But in some instances, you may have to make a decision to travel. If you do that, please, please, please wear a face covering consistently. And if you're doing things like traveling, try to do that by car, if at all possible, and avoid travel on planes, trains, or buses. all modes of travel that would require you to interact with other folks. Commissioner Miller mentioned that air travel is down, but not by a significant margin. Nothing against the airline companies here, but I would really like to see that number go down. That would make my anxiety level go down quite a bit, and I think it would potentially have an impact on COVID-19 rates as well. So again, want to ask folks to limit travel and also to limit the number of guests to potentially your immediate household, and really consider celebrating virtually. In preparation for this talk, I did some Googling to research online celebration activities that folks could do. And there's just a ton of resources out there, from streaming movies together to virtual games, and all kinds of activities that folks could engage in virtually. If you, if you're the kind of person that really has to have extended family to celebrate with, which again, I want to make clear, I'm not encouraging that at all. I highly, highly encourage folks to limit activities for 2 weeks before a gathering, and encouraging guests to do the same. So essentially quarantining yourselves for 2 weeks before you come together, again, all to avoid spreading COVID-19 through a gathering. Again, if you're going to gather and you're going to have folks over, please take some time to consider seating arrangements. You want to group families together as much as possible. You want to try to separate folks who are high risk, such as folks who may have a chronic condition or seniors. And you want to try to hold any activities or meals outdoors, if at all possible. Now, I know it's getting colder, but I also know that there's a lot of, that there's been a run on outdoor heaters. So just something to consider investing in. If you can't do that, open your windows. Getting some airflow in can also be helpful in terms of reducing risk. And finally, I just have to put a plug in for the flu shot. It is a vaccine for a virus that we absolutely have available, and I just want to encourage everyone out there to get vaccinated. So I'm going to conclude my comments there and turn it back over to Commissioner Miller. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshi. Those were such excellent points. So just a couple of things I just want to summarize before we go to Heather's point, is that the numbers that you showed were for suburban Cook County. And if you could explain the difference as to why we have numbers for suburban Cook County and why the city of Chicago has their own numbers.
Absolutely. So our health department, the Cook County Department of Public Health, is the health department for most of suburban Cook County. The city of Chicago has its own health department, and they, of course, have access to all of their data and make that available on their website.
Great. And the numbers that you showed were so insightful. I think that once people get comfortable seeing these numbers, you'll be able to track what's happening right where you live. If you live in suburban Cook County, or if you live in the city of Chicago, you can go track those numbers in the city of Chicago. And I've been posting the numbers every other day for every municipality in suburban Cook, South suburban Cook County, which is mostly the area that I represent. But all the numbers are there on the website. So, and one other key point, Dr. Joshi, that I wanted you to just emphasize for people, when you say limit it to people in your household, so that means people who actually only live in your household, not come by every other day or visit on occasion. Can you just explain that a little bit more, and why you emphasize it, but one more time, why that makes a difference?
Absolutely. So the smaller you can keep the group of people that you're immediately in contact with, the lower your risk is going to be, right? And so, yes, you make a really good point in that some folks may consider those occasional droppers by to be members of your household, and socially, I totally get that. But you want to make sure that if you're having people over, at the very least, they've quarantined for 14 days. And you want to separate yourself. You want to try to separate yourselves from anyone that that does not live in your immediate household, like in your house.
Every day.
Every day.
Right. So that is really important because I've actually heard some friends say, well, my mom doesn't live with us, but she lives alone. So she has to come over. That's not a good idea, especially if they're elderly. And you mentioned the chronic conditions. And maybe you could just talk about because people get used to people having diabetes, but that is on the list, right?
Yes.
So what should we be avoiding? These are people who are high risk and that should not be taking any extra disadvantages to be around people who potentially could have COVID-19 or carry it.
Absolutely. I would say err on the side of caution here. So I think about diabetes, I think about being overweight or obese, I think about high blood pressure, and I think about anybody with any kind of lung disease I would certainly be concerned about. But please don't take that as an exhaustive list. Again, err on the side of caution. Anybody with any chronic illnesses, I would say, take care of yourself. I want you to stay healthy. And in order to do that, and to fight this, again, really just insidious disease that's taking advantage of our natural tendencies, make sure you, stay home.
Well, thank you. We are going to come back to you in just a bit, but we're also I want to see if Ryan can get a snapshot of your holiday do's and don'ts, so we can share that too, because it's a great reminder. So Heather, we wanted to get to you because when we talk about how this is affecting everyone, there are so many people isolated, so many people living alone. We take it for granted if we, have a family that we have to quarantine with. But some people are alone, but then some people are with family who might be going out and having to go to work because they're essential workers. I live with an essential worker who goes to work every day, and it's worrisome to me. But what are the other effects this is having on people's mental stability, emotional well-being? Just the whole factor of the holidays are supposed to be a happy time, and now we have a situation that is causing a lot of anxiety, and what should people be doing about that? So I'd love for you to just talk about the mental health aspect.
Okay, sure. So there's like a lot going on right now. So when you said, Donna, how is this COVID affecting people? It's causing depression. People are isolated. You mentioned anxiety. They're stressed out because they're relegated to being at home. We're on a major lockdown. I even made a joke with my beautician the other day. I said, I feel like we're teenagers. It's like lockdown, go to your room, and there's like nothing else to do because the world has changed from what we were used to seeing. So when we scale back and we're coming up against Thanksgiving. So right now, as is being said, hey, you need to celebrate with the people that you reside with. And we might be used to looking forward to our extended cousins coming by, our aunts and uncles. So that can dampen the mood just a little bit. But I would say to people, just step back and just really be grateful that we made it to Thanksgiving, and be grateful that who you have to celebrate Thanksgiving with, that you can touch, that's in your home. So you want to be thankful that your mom and dad is still here and you're living with them, or you're thankful for your sister and brother who you're residing within the house that's still here, or the mom, dad, and kids. That's your family right now. That's who you're going to see and break bread with. Be grateful for that. Now, the aspect of the technology is huge. So now we have Zoom we can take advantage of, Google Hangout. But then I think about the people who are not tech savvy. So let me focus on the elderly. This comes a call when the elderly need to call a granddaughter that could be a teenager or even a neighbor and say, hey, I want to Zoom. I want to see face to face. Can you walk me through it? Hey, have you been quarantining? Can you kind of come by my house, mask up, and kind of show me the apparatus to get that started so I can start to Zoom? It's about having that conversation. And I would suggest to the younger relatives, check on the older relatives, call them up, say, hey, this is, do you need anything? We're Zooming. Let me know. Don't leave the elderly isolated because they're looking at the news and media and they don't know what's going on. They need that connectivity. That is so very key. So now I'm thinking about, we have the elderly, we have to think about, we have the teenagers, we have to think about. So for instance, when I was going over, what do the elderly need right now? I think it's very important that they stay connected to their church. So there are 3 churches in the city of Chicago that I know are very engaged with the elderly community, checking on them. So I'm just going to like name 3 and some of the things that. So first we have, and I'm a member of this church, Third Baptist Church Chicago, with the Pastor Hughes. We have St. Sabina and Trinity Church of Chicago. One thing that I know that Pastor Hughes is very instrumental in doing for the elderly community is every Thursday he has a prayer call. So you call and you engage, and I sit back and look at how the elderly are talking and connecting to one another, and that gives them a sense of community and letting us know, hey, our pastor is with us and he still cares about us. So I would encourage the elderly, take advantage of the prayer lines. St. Sabina has a food bank. If you need food or groceries, you can reach out to them. That's Father Flagger's connection. Also, I noticed that for Thanksgiving, Trinity is having an online virtual Thanksgiving service at 10 a.m. You can stream that. Pastor Hughes is having a pre-celebration Thanksgiving on Wednesday for online. So that's something that the elderly can do, is call and connect with the local churches and their pastors. When we think about the teenagers, I know how they feel because they've been doing remote with high school, so they can't connect with their friends. So I would just suggest to my teens, let's start doing some artwork. Let's start listening to music, connecting with a social pod. Let me step back and say a social pod. These are teens who respect wearing a mask, who understand 6 feet, and is hand sanitizer. Depending upon the weather, you can meet in the park. There's a lot of things you can do. A bike trail, maybe do roller skating, but still practice that mask. And this can happen during, because we're rolling into Christmas and other holidays where we won't see each other. So it's important for them to get creative. I would even say, like, let's do some home economics. Start learning how to cook, making new families. And that ties into Thanksgiving. Want to celebrate a loved one that's passed. Your grandmother always made candy, and so maybe your dad always liked the pot roast. Pull out and make that recipe in honor of him. Zoom with your mom and say, hey, let's make this pot roast together. It might look strange because we're cooking virtually, but that's still a sense of connection during this time. So the teenagers have to get creative, because I know how that can be, being at home and you feel restricted, but the music, the artwork, and connecting with your pod, using FaceTime on the iPhone, doing a Zoom, that's very important. And then if we circle back, families, on Thanksgiving, I wrote some things, and hopefully you all can take the notes. Families that's listening, is purchase gratitude journals. Start with what you're thankful for this year. Share it amongst each other. Decorations. Let's pick a color theme for the home. What do you all want to decorate it, or decorate the apartment? Do the placemats, the fine linens. Come together and do that. Start to have a positive conversation. Craft out a menu. Maybe not turkey this year. Maybe we're going to make ham. Maybe we're going to grill, because we're under a different climate at this certain time. So I would just suggest have positive conversations. Step outside of the box. Be very grateful, and it goes back to the doctor. Be very intentional who you want to come by, and remember the stress, the mask, the social distancing, lifting up the windows. But I really believe we can get through this time and really reach out to your church and your pastors, because they'll connect with you in ways you never thought of, because there is a connection between the spiritual and the mental health benefits. It really will boost your spirits and your morale. So those are kind of like some of my takeaways and points for you all during this holiday. But I understand it's tough, guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Those are really good ideas, and multi-generational ideas too, because you're right. It does affect seniors differently than teenagers, and et cetera. So Heather, what would you say to someone, or what resources should someone do if they're feeling, like getting to depression, where they just say, you know what, I'm hopeless. I don't want to try to do a Zoom. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't even want to eat Thanksgiving if I have to eat it alone. That kind of anxiety and depression and feeling of hopelessness affects a lot of people, and probably more so elderly people, but I'm sure younger people too, if they live alone without their parents, or it's their first time away from Thanksgiving with their family. What are some kind of resources or some places that people could go outside of the church? I mean, if someone wanted to speak with a counselor, could they call and I don't know, have a hotline, or is there a number or someone they could call just to kind of break the ice so they don't feel so lonely at that moment?
Sure. So they can reach out to NAMI, NAMI, and that's really pretty much an organization with a streamline with counselors, and you can call for free and be able to speak to a counselor and let them know, hey, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling depressed, might feeling a little suicidal. That counselor, 24 hours crisis line, they will definitely talk with you and walk you through and give you some suggestions to make you feel a little better during this time. So that was a big resource. American Red Cross, they have hotline, crisis prevention. And so those are the two main ones that I'm definitely thinking of that I would push, because they're very effective with connecting with people who, like you said, are lonely, isolated, and don't want to be bothered. So I would start with NAMI and American Red Cross.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll try to get those numbers and put them in the chat. So those are good ideas as well. And I do know that, someone did put that in there. I do know that Zoom has offered free Zoom on Thanksgiving Day for people. So that's another option, that if you were worried that it might cost you money to connect your whole family, at least Zoom has taken that part of it away. And then there's just the technology potential barrier where you might not know how to work it, but there are people who can help you work it as well, figure out how to connect people or to connect yourself. And there's lots of people who can do that. So I think that those are excellent ideas, and that's just where we are right now. So I just wanted to thank you both for sharing your expertise again. And as usual, you're so thoughtful and proactive and really giving people great ideas. I did want to go through a few questions that are in the chat, and then some other questions that we had from before. So one person did ask, what about smokers who smoke outside? I guess he means like if the family is in your house and then you go outside and smoke, what are the effects on the other people who might be in the house?
Yeah. So just a couple of general comments. I think if you're a smoker, the most important thing you can do for your health is to stop smoking, because smoking affects every single system in your body, and none of those effects are good. So there are things that you can do to help yourself quit smoking. There's the Illinois Tobacco Quit Line that, if you just Google, can actually help you find access to services that can help you quit. And they're amazing because they will make follow-up calls and help you stay motivated to quit. Regarding smoking and COVID risk, I think, again, anything that affects your lungs, and smoking certainly does, is likely going to put you at higher risk for poor outcomes for COVID. So I want to get that in there. I think one more thing to mention, a couple more things to mention, are that secondhand smoke is also dangerous to your family members. So it's just more reason to maybe consider quitting. And regardless of if you're smoking outside or inside, it sort of gets on your clothes and stuff, and just that can make asthma, for example, much worse. So if you've got a loved one with asthma, even if you're smoking outside, if you've got it on your clothes, that can affect them adversely. All that said, I think in general, celebration should be had outdoors. As I mentioned earlier, those are the lowest risk ways to celebrate. Those are, a lower risk way to celebrate. And if you can't do that, open a window and make sure that everyone is spread apart and physically distanced.
That's great. Yes. So I hope that answers the question. I think it does. And from a public health standpoint, right, smoking, the best thing to do is to try to quit, and it's very difficult. We understand that. Yes. So Heather, one other thing I wanted to focus on is kind of, we talked about there's resources that people can call if they need help, But if someone should go to a therapist, should they be afraid of going to see a therapist to talk about their issues? And what happens? Does someone have to say things if they go to a therapist? Maybe you could just explain, when you do make that initial appointment, what does that look like? And do you have to make up things to say that you want to see a therapist, or you just actually need someone to talk to?
Okay, so when you are making that decision to see therapy, it's pretty much you have to find a good resource. So that would be like Psychology Today or Open Path, and they'll give you a streamline of therapist, and you can see our pictures. And I think sometimes seeing a pick up a therapist, it's like, oh, okay, they look warm and engaged, and so let me call and connect with them. And it's very seamless. It's a seamless intake form that you would allowed and connected to your therapist, and then from there, that's when it really starts, like during that intake, and you're able to speak with a therapist and mention, like, you know what, I'm feeling a little down or sad. One of my parents just passed, and then a therapist gently walks you through what you need and how therapy will look based off that conversation. So then once the appointment is booked, and we might have to do Zoom or do in person due to the COVID, we're not expecting, okay, what age did you realize you didn't like your mom, or tell me more about that failure. It doesn't happen like that. You show up and we make it compassionate and healing for you. And you start to talk about, I'll say, so what brought you therapy today? What can I help you with? What do you need? Those are my top 3 questions to get them engaged. And then from there, they start to tell me what's going on. And I say, well, let's unpack. And, I self-soothe with them and offer them encouragement, very compassionate. I'm like, I can't hug you guys, but I make sure you feel I'm hugging you with my questions and my compassion. If people can feel you care, that's really how that therapeutic connection strengthens and causes people to want to heal, grow, and change, to cause them to come to therapy in the first place. So it's an intimate and vulnerable position to be in therapy, but if you have a good therapist, it's a lifelong journey and joy you'll see in the end, pretty much. That makes sense.
Yes, that really makes sense. And then also we've heard just from the news reports and things that might have been out there on social media, is that this pandemic has also caused other increases in substance abuse, for instance. Child abuse, because people are at home, stress, domestic violence. So if anyone is experiencing any one of those issues as well as a result from being at home or being isolated, there are resources. I'm sure NAMI also has those resources to help deal with those issues. Last month was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I did spend some time going to several domestic violence shelters in the south suburbs. And unfortunately, they have seen an increase in women and men who are seeking shelter and needing the assistance of domestic violence shelters. So just wanted to encourage people that if they know someone, or as you're talking to someone who might be isolated and they're not really letting on that might be an issue, there might be gentle ways that you can also let them know that there's resources out there to help them with those subjects as well. The other thing is, Heather, I wanted to ask you if you wanted to just elaborate a little bit on any of those resources that might be out there, and what if you're the friend of someone, because I think sometimes we get in that situation where we're talking to someone and we think, something doesn't sound exactly right. Like, what should they do to try to encourage or let them know that there's help out there?
Okay, definitely. So domestic violence is always a very hard and murky subject to deal with, specifically with victims. And sometimes they even believe that this is domestic violence. So you have to create the language for them to understand, and you have to be very creative because of what's on the other side of it. So RAIN definitely is an organization. I just wanted to add that works with domestic violence victims and survivors and etc. So let's scale back and say you have a friend that you think is experiencing domestic violence during the COVID time. So we got to think really quick, right? So let's develop a safety plan. So how does that safety plan look? Well, first off, you need to etch out, okay, my friend needs to come to this address. So there needs to be a specific address your friend knows that she can immediately go to. You need to ask her, where are you placing your car keys? Have them nearby, have a little stash. You can run your car keys at any time, because you have to break away from this person that is abusing you. There definitely needs to be, you all need to etch out, like, okay, at 12 o'clock, I'm going to be parked at the end of the corner, and you come out, make sure you have your bag and some things packed. If you have children, there has to be a creative conversation to the children. Like, you know what? When mommy's going to the closet to get her purse, I have you all's bags and I all your favorite items. Let's just take them and go. No more talking, because we're going to meet the friend. But the friend and the victim have to create a language. They have to have key code words, like, today is my birthday. And that might mean I am leaving him because I feel he will really harm me and my kids. And when their friend hears that, they know at 12 o'clock to be at the end of the corner. The friend knows to go in the closet, get purse, get the keys, get her children stuff, and go in the car and go to safety, which is probably the friend's house. And you have to be secret about it. You can't tell your kids, we're going to this address, because we don't know. Kids have cell phones. They could call the dad and alert it, and it's dangerous. Once you get them safe, then you can act the shelters, and they're put in place in unique shelters. I'm not going to go into how these shelters are unique just because, but they're unique shelters that can protect the woman and the safety. But you all have to create a quick safety plan, and, like, don't text, kind of like call each other, like, etch it out and keep it safe where the predator will not find it. Be very creative with language, symbols, and everything, and quickly delete the text messages if you're trying to create a safety plan. Quick, and do not use that email, because he will check that, or she, if she's the predator, will check that. So be very careful and cautious. That's what I would suggest during this time.
Thank you. And I Dr. Joshi, did you have anything you wanted to add on this subject?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have seen across Cook County, more in the city, not so much in the suburbs, an increase in opioid overdose deaths. That's pretty concerning. The city, in the city, there's just more behavioral health resources, including resources for addressing opioid addiction, and it's certainly something that my agency is working hard to address. I agree with Heather's comments regarding the need to just look out for yourself, and her earlier comments about therapy and how useful it can be, and how sometimes it's tough going it alone, and just having somebody to talk to can be just really helpful and can help you unburden yourself. So it's okay.
Right. And that's just another symptom of this pandemic, right? So there's so many things. It's multifaceted. We have to learn how to adapt in the new normal. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. One other thing I just wanted to suggest, because I heard a report about how you should go to the grocery store right now. I mean, you have to think about all of these things. And some grocery stores have certain hours for seniors to come in early in the morning, so they have time to not be in a crowd and not be rushed, and people are there to help them. But find out if you have to go to the grocery store, probably today, tomorrow, these are the days to go before it gets too crowded at the last minute. And check out the grocery stores in your area. If you are able to do online shopping with the kind where they will deliver to your house, there are plenty of resources for that. And that's another thing, that if you don't know how to do it, you can just reach out. There's resources out there. And earlier was mentioned how there's so many churches and other community groups out there that are providing Thanksgiving meals to people. And if you are in need of anything like that, I would just say, if you know someone or have someone who doesn't know where to go, please contact our office, because we can put you in touch with someone who might be able to help as far as that goes. We have a lot of community partners throughout Cook County in different areas that are providing food baskets, free turkeys. There was just several huge giveaways over the past weekend. And so this is, again, not the time to worry about what you're going to eat if you're in need. And a lot of people are. And this is also unprecedented times for people who have to need a food shelter. And that's another symptom of this pandemic. So it's not, anything to be ashamed of. It's also something that is a resource, and there are plenty of people out to help. So I just wanted to make sure that we have that out there. So there were a couple other people. April, thank you so much for posting a couple of other resources. April Tolbert is posting some resources in the Facebook chat about some other, if you're having stress or mental health issues, some other domestic violence hotlines. And we all need all the information. So April, appreciate that so much. Well, I'll just give you guys a couple of minutes to do some closing remarks, and then we will close out for today because I don't see any additional questions in the chat. But I think we've learned a lot and actually gotten some engagement from some people out there who are sharing their expertise as well. So Dr. Joshi, do you want to just give us your final thoughts for today?
Yeah, sure. I just want to end by saying, please stay safe. In order to do so, wear a mask, maintain your distance, wash your hands, and don't forget to get your flu shot.
And also, you can get a free flu shot at most Walgreens, right? Bless you. CVS or at Cook County Hospital.
Excuse me, sorry, I was just about to sneeze again.
Okay.
Yes, you can certainly get a flu shot through Cook County Health or through any of a number of pharmacies or private providers, community health centers throughout suburban Cook County and Cook County in general. Thank you.
Right. So those resources are also available. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Joshi. So Heather, any final thoughts from your perspective?
Oh, yes, definitely. I would just say stay positive and definitely be grateful for how far we've come, and just always stay connected to the community, develop your pod and your tribe, even if it has to be with technology, and definitely stay connected to your church family as well, because that's in these Pacific times, as well as community centers.
Well, thank you all. So we do want to say thank you all for joining us today. We want to make sure everyone has a happy holiday, but a healthy holiday. And if you need any additional resources, feel free to reach out to our office. We'll put that number in the chat as well as an email address. And thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks.
Bye, guys.